Now, here's the thing. The reality is we only have one job as a parent, but it's a big job. And that job is to do our best that we can to be the best representation of who God is to our kids. And I'll be honest with you, that could be pretty scary, can't it? It's a big deal, though. It's actually something that we really need to focus on. And the thing is, there's no magical answer to this whole parenting thing. There's not one solution that always fixes every problem. And parenting is really a challenge sometimes. But there are some things I think that we can apply from God's word that can help us to be successful parents. Comedian Jim Gaffigan, he says this about parenting. Sometimes I feel unqualified to be a parent. I call those times being awake. Anybody ever feel like that? Like sometimes you're like, man, I don't even know what to do. I don't even know how I should handle this situation. And so really our goal of this series that we kicked off last week and we wrap up next week called Parental Guidance Required is really to give you some practical advice and wisdom about how you can be the best parents that you can be to your kids. Now, I'll make a side note here for those of you who maybe aren't parents yet, maybe who don't ever want to be parents, or maybe you think that you're done parenting and you're like, this doesn't apply to me. This message series applies to all of us because really what we're talking about when it comes to relationships is something that we need to apply to our all lives. Now, just to review where we were last week, we talked about the fact that our culture today, the trend is this, that many kids end up being experience rich, but they're relationship poor. Like we do everything as we can as parents to give our kids the best. We want to give them nice clothes and a nice car. We want to give them good academic experiences. We want them to have good experiences when it comes to sports. And we want them to have good vacations and all these things. But in the process, what happens is we give them experiences, but we don't invest in them much relationally. And we talked about how, as parents, our mindset needs to change, and we need to be focused more on being relationally rich over experience rich. And really, we said there are three relationships that kind of make up who we are. As we get to adult age, there are three relationships that kind of center us. The first relationship, we talked about it last week, is our kids' relationship with us. And we were kind of using these dials, to kind of help us understand we've got to dial these relationships in and out. And the first question that we said we need to ask ourselves, I hope that you even thought about it this week, is what am I doing to enhance my child's relationship with me? Like, I encourage you to maybe take your kids on a date or do something. Last night, my son Blake and I, we went to the Cavs versus the Mavs game. It was something that we had planned for a while, and we got to go last night to the game, and I took some of my own advice this week. Instead of driving to Dallas, we got on the train in Richland Hills, and we rode the train into downtown downtown Dallas, right at the American Airlines Center. And the reason I did that is so I could sit with my son and talk to him rather than me driving and trying to pay attention to the GPS and know where I'm going. We had a really good conversation. And then we got there early, and so we got to eat dinner together. And then when you get to the arena, I mean, the two of us are two goofballs, right? We're just yelling at the referees and everything else. So there's not a lot of conversation going on there. But then we got back on the train, and we were able to talk some more. And we got into the car on our last little leg to come back to our house. And my son Blake said this. He said, "Dad, thanks for just a really fun night and a good conversation. It was a blast. I had a blast." And that's what we're talking about. Like, we need to dial in to our kids' relationships. And then we talked about last week too, the second relationship that we need to dial in our kids' life is our kids' relationship with God. And that's the question we're going to look at today is what am I doing to advance my child's relationship with God? And then next week, we'll finish out this series, and we're going to talk about the third relationship that we need to dial in and dial out some relationships, and that is our kids' relationship with people outside the home. And the question we're going to look at next week is this: what kind of relationships do they have with other people outside our home? And so the goal of this series is really to challenge us to get really intentional about what matters the most with our kids, and it has to do with relationships. Because the fact is this: we can't always control the experiences our kids have. We can't even always control the decisions that they will make, but we can control and dial in the relationships that they have in their life. And so today, we want to focus on this center dial and how we dial God into our kids' relational world. And we're going to answer this question: what am I doing to advance my child's relationship with God. And so my goal today is really to give you some practical things that you can do to dial God into your kid's life. Now, let me ask you this. For those of you who are parents, how many of you have ever lost a kid before? Like have you ever been to an amusement park and or maybe at a department store or some other place and you lost one of your kids? I remember when our daughter McKenna was 4 years of age, she got lost. We lost her. We were at the local park. Our son Blake was playing baseball. I was coaching the baseball team, and my wife Amanda and daughter were there. And Blake's his teammates had some little brothers and sisters who were also there. Well, they didn't really care about the game, so they decided to play a game of hide and go seek. Well, McKenna was 4 years old at the time, and she's just really excited to play this game, and so she's running around. And on this particular day, I will never forget, she was wearing these little pink Crocs. And one of her Crocs, as she went running, it came falling off. Well, McKenna didn't want to be found, so she left the Croc where it was, and she went to hide. Well, a few minutes went by, and the kids all found everybody but McKenna. McKenna's really good at this game of hide and seek. And so one of the little girls came over to my wife, and she said, "Have you seen McKenna?" Instantly, Amanda got up and she began to scan around the field, and that's when she saw that pink Croc that was lying there on the ground. Now I could tell you what Amanda didn't do in that moment, right? Like, she didn't just sit there and go, "Well, you know what? McKenna knows her way back. She'll come back in a few minutes." She didn't say, "You know what? McKenna, she just needs to be more responsible. I can't believe that girl. She left her Croc lying there and was playing this game." And she definitely didn't say this, "You know what? We had McKenna for 4 years. Life's good. I mean, she'll find her way." She didn't say any of those things. Instead, what does she do? She stands up and she starts yelling our daughter's name at the top of her lungs. And I'm on the first base line coaching kids, and I hear my daughter yelling, or my wife yelling for my daughter. And then she begins to rush around because she's got to find her. Now, why do we do that as parents? Because we love our kids, right? We don't want them to be lost. If they go lost, we care so much about them that we've got to go in search of them. And there's no way when we're a parent, if our child is lost, we're not going to go looking for them. When our kids get lost, our first response is always to panic, isn't it? Like, instantly, we're like, "Oh no, where are they at? We got to find them." We have to go in search of them. But why wouldn't we have that same kind of passion when it comes to our kids' spiritual lives? This has to be our response. And look, some of you right now in the room, maybe you're here and you might be losing your kids spiritually. You might not even know that today. Some of you may have an idea that your kids are kind of going a different path, but some of you might not be aware of it. And I think the question that we have to ask ourselves all the time is this: do I really know where my kids are spiritually? One of the most powerful passages of Scripture comes from Matthew chapter 16. And Jesus, he's talking to his disciples, and he's telling them that his time here on this earth is about to end, and he's about to be crucified on this cross. And he wants them to know what he's calling them to. And he says, "I want you to be these sold out followers of mine." And notice what he says in verse 26. He says, "And what do you benefit if you gain the whole world, but you lose your own soul? Is there anything worth more than your soul?" And Jesus asked these guys this question. Now, the answer to Jesus' question right here is a resounding no. I mean, there's nothing more important than giving your life to Christ and following him. That's what he wanted the disciples to understand, and he wanted them to tell other people about it. And as parents, our job is to be the ones who are nurturing this relationship with God in our kids' lives. Like we need to be dialing God into our kids' lives. Unfortunately, though, some of us have been missing out on that opportunity. And look, I know some of you might say, "Well, I would never contribute to something like that, Pastor Nate." I wouldn't. But I think sometimes we contribute to it and we don't even know that we're doing it. Now, here's why I say that. I think sometimes we encourage our kids to have these experiences, to be involved in certain hobbies or get into sports or academics. I can list all these things that we say are number one pursuits in our kids' lives. And ultimately what ends up happening is their relationship with God begins to lack. It takes a back seat. And again, we don't intend to do this. Like, none of us wake up one day and say, "You know what, we're going to put God second and all these other things first," but it just happens. And so we've got to make sure that the byproduct of our passion isn't to see our kids succeed in other areas over this relationship with God and how important that is first. And this goes back to what we talked about last week. We spend a lot of time and effort and energy into making sure our kids have what we consider a successful a childhood, but that doesn't necessarily make them successful adults. They live this experience-rich life, but what happens is they end up being relationship poor. And so the question is, how do we change that? And I think one of the best places to start is by asking ourselves this question: how do I personally view my relationship with God? Because how you view your relationship with God will help ultimately determine how your kids value it. And I think there's one of 5 categories that every person in this room falls into. For some of you here today, maybe you fall into this category of it doesn't matter. God's not important. It's not on my radar. That maybe your impression of those who call themselves followers of Christ, because of something that happened to you in your life, you say, I don't want that for my kids. I don't want them to be messed into that. I don't want that for them. And so that's where you fall. Maybe your category is this, that faith is private. It's a private thing. It's between me and God. Nobody else needs to know. But you see, nowhere in Scripture does it say that faith is private. It says it should be a public thing, that we should tell other people about who God is and what he's done in our lives. The third category you could fall into is it's a good thing. It's like broccoli and Brussels sprouts, although I don't know why anybody would eat that stuff anyway, right? Like it's about etiquette and doing proper manners. It's like God is a good thing and I should have a little bit of it in my life. Maybe that's where you land. Or the fourth category is this: relationship with God is a priority, along with academics and education and sports and good manners and good health. And so he's there, but there's other things that are also vying for that time that God should have and the priority that God should have. And I think the fifth category is where we should try to land as we parent our kids, and that is our relationship with God is the most important thing. He has to be number one above everything else. And the truth is this, like no one has more potential to dial in the God dial in your kid's life than you. That you have the most influence. Now, I'll be honest with you, sometimes as a pastor, one of the things that I hear people will say is, yeah, I hear what you're saying, Pastor Nate, but don't you think that that's the church's job? Like you're the pastor, you're the one who went to school, or Compass kids, Compass students, they're the ones that should be dialing God into my kid's life. That's why I bring them here, because I don't know what to do. I mean, I hear that all the time. But you know, the problem with that thought process is this: even if you have perfect attendance here at Compass North Fort Worth, and your kids go to Compass Kids every single Sunday, you know how many hours a week they're spending time with us? 52 hours a year, right? Out of an entire year, you know how many hours are in an entire year? 8,760. So even if you come every week, that means there's still 8,702 hours that your kids are outside of the walls of what's happening here at Compass North Fort Worth. And so if there's anyone who has more potential to influence your kids, it's you. And the question is this: how will you use your influence? Because the Bible has a lot to say to parents about how we ought to influence our kids. Do you know what the Bible has to say about how the church ought to influence kids? It actually says nothing. But I don't want you to misunderstand what I'm saying here. Like, we want to be a resource. Like, we want to be here to help you. We want to help give you the tools and things that will make you be able to give your kids those things that will help them dial God into their life. But it starts with you. Because God intended for parents to be the major influence in your child's life. And here's the truth: you will be the spiritual influence in your kid's life whether you like it or not. Like, one way or another, you will be the one who either points them towards God or turns them away from God. You will be the one who either draws them toward the faith or who turns them away from it. It's kind of scary, but it's true. And I think it's scary for a couple of reasons. The first reason it's scary is maybe for you, it's scary because God was used in all the wrong ways when you were growing up. Like maybe for some of you here today, God was used as a scare tactic for you. It was told if you didn't behave, then God's going to punish you. Oh, you can't dance because that's evil. God's going to punish you for that. I mean, if you make that choice, God is going to punish you. You haven't been a good boy or a good girl, God's going to punish you. And for you, what happened is the God dial was turned the wrong way, and so you're a little bit scared of this whole idea of following God with your life. For others of you, you know why this is scary? Is because you didn't grow up in a home where God was the center, where God was the priority. And so for you, you're like, I don't even know how to do this in my own kid's life. I'm not sure what to do. And I also don't want to dishonor what my parents did. This is our mindset today. For some reason, we think we have to follow the patterns of our parents when sometimes the patterns of our parents aren't the right ones. And maybe we need to follow the biblical pattern and not the one that our parents set, because it might not be right. So let me give you 3 questions to ask yourself to help turn the dial spiritually the right way. The first question is this: what do I want my kids to become? This is big picture thinking. Like, this is for those of you who have that artistic brain and the mindset. You've got a canvas in front of you, and you begin with the end in mind. Like, you already know what the picture of the future is going to be like. And when I say vision, what I mean by this, vision is a mental portrait of a preferable future. What is the vision that you have for your kids? It shouldn't be performance expectation. It should be relationship expectation with God at the center, with you heavily involved in their lives, and the right people that you've also dialed in. You know, last week we looked at these words from Solomon in Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, and I read them pretty quickly. I want to dig into these a little bit more this morning. In Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, Solomon says these words. He says, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, submit to him, and he will make your path straight. Now, Solomon, he was writing to his own kids about how he hoped that they would one day point their own kids to God. And look at what Solomon says about our trust in God here. He says, he starts by saying, you have to trust in God with all your heart. Parents, your kids, they see your heart. And they'll either see one of 2 ways. They'll see a genuine heart that is sold out for God, or they'll see a divided heart that is kind of maybe leaning towards God in some ways, but there's other things that are vying for your time as well. At 1 Samuel chapter 16, verse 7, it says, man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. You want to know who else looks at the heart? Your kids look at your heart. I mean, the world around you, they might see the outside of what you're doing. They might see you from a distance, but your kids, they see your heart. And we as parents, we need to point our kids' hearts towards God's as well. And then he goes on to say this. He says, not only do we need to trust in the Lord with all your heart, he says you need to lean not on your own understanding. As parents, we need to help our kids lean on what God says and what the principles we read in Scripture say. And if we do that, then Solomon says that what happens next is we submit to him, and our kids, they will follow suit. Another translation says they will acknowledge him. How do they acknowledge him? Well, they begin to acknowledge him in their marriages. They put God at the center. He's number one, and everything else comes after that. They will acknowledge him in their friendships. They'll acknowledge him with their finances too. I mean, this is what a generous person does, right? They give to God first because they trust God with everything that they have. And they say, God, I know you're the one who gave it to us. We're going to give it back to you first. And we're going to trust that you're going to provide for us. That's what a generous person does. And that's what our kids will do if they see that in our own lives. They will begin to acknowledge him. They'll submit to him. And he'll be the one they look to for guidance. And then finally, what Solomon says is, if you submit to God, then he says you're on the straight path. I don't know about you, but I don't think any parent here goes, you know what, I hope my kids get off the straight path sometimes. Like, I hope they make some really serious mistakes in their life. They get in trouble with the law. They end up maybe in prison. I mean, I hope that that's how my kids turn out. Nobody says that. Because we want our kids to be on the straight path, but I think that means we need to do some searching sometimes, and we got to ask ourselves this question: is the pathway to God easy to find in my house? You know, Amanda and I, we're kind of in a unique position right now. Our kids they're in that stage of life where they're kind of coming into their own despite the flaws and the weaknesses that they have and we all have in life. And I'll be honest with you, I really like the kids that my kids are becoming. In fact, I would say this: I love who my kids are becoming. I love the people that they're becoming. And look, if you don't like who your kids are becoming, maybe you need to start turning the dials in their life by modeling the way you want them to live, by living it out in your own life first. You know, there's another question we need to ask ourselves about our kids as well. And that question is this: where are they right now in their relationship with God? Because every phase is critical. Where they are in their spiritual journey is much like the chart of a kid's developmental stages. If you've seen this before, we'll put this on the screen. From 0 to 4 years, that's the discovery phase for kids. That's when they're putting things in their mouth, they're tasting everything, and they're trying it out, right? From 5 to 8 years, that's the testing phase. They're pushing your buttons to see how far they can get you before you say no, right? And then 9 to 12 years is when they're concluding. That's when they're coming to some conclusions. That might be when they are making that decision, some decisions, good or bad. That's what's happening. And statistics show this. This is astounding to me. Statistics show that 85% of people come to Christ between the ages of 0 and 14 years of age. Now, why is that? Because they're going through these stages of discovery, testing, and concluding. And so these ages are critical for your kids. Proverbs 19:18 says this. It says, discipline your children while there is hope. Otherwise, you will ruin their lives. Can I be honest with you this morning? Every time I read this proverb, I get a little bit scared. Because I don't want to be the reason that my kids' lives get ruined because I'm not doing the right things to point them in the right direction. And parents, if you're in this stage of life right now, between 0 and 14 years of age, understand it's critical. It's a critical moment to start pointing your kids to God. It doesn't mean it's the only time that you have to point your kids in the right direction. But you know what happens at the age of 13, right? Puberty, right? And we know what puberty is, right? Proestrogen, testosterone, they come together. There's this biophysical disaster of epic proportions, basically. It's called emotions that go crazy. Hormones are racing, and it's just this weird time, and you're like, I don't know what to do, right? And so we don't have much time when it comes to that time. And the pattern repeats itself again, but this time, look how fast it goes. Show this, 13 to 14 is discovery. 15 to 17 is testing. 18 and on is concluding. And so these stages that we see in a kid's developmental life, when it comes to their motor skills and all that stuff, these stages happen spiritually too. There's discovery, there's testing, there's concluding based upon what they've experienced and even what they've heard. And so as parents, it's important to be realistic about where your kids are and how you can put them on the right path. And if you're wondering when you should start turning these dials, let me just say this. Right now, like as soon as you leave here, as soon as you pick them up from Compass Kids, start turning the dials. Because if your kid was in trouble at school, like struggling with grades, what would you do? You'd get them a tutor, right? If they were struggling at a sport they were really good at, you might get them a trainer. If they weren't feeling very good, you'd take them to the doctor and get them healthy. But maybe you're thinking, look, this is Nate, this is different than the spiritual side of things. Like maybe you're thinking, I can't force that on my kids. And you're right, you can't force it, maybe not. But you can at least turn the dial in the right direction by pointing your kids to God. And so I want to give you one final question today to ask yourself. How can I help them take the next step? I'll leave you with a few thoughts on beginning to turn the God dial in your kid's life. The first thing I would say is this. They can't make the next step until you take the first step. Here's what I mean by that. Understand, when your heart truly beats for the Lord, when you are sold out for God, it becomes more natural for your children to embrace their faith. The reality is, if you genuinely love the Lord, your children will be more apt to love the Lord with all their heart. Your kids, they want someone who is real. They want someone who is genuine. They want someone who is authentic. And look, having a godly family, it doesn't happen overnight. It takes time, but you got to start taking the steps. And that can't happen until you take the first step. Matthew 6:33 says this, but seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Imagine what might happen if we started to seek first God's kingdom and his righteousness above our career, above our money, a hobby, or anything else, but God was truly first in our lives. You see, your kids can't take the next step spiritually until you take the first step. And maybe some of you here today need to take that first step in your life. Maybe you've never done that. Maybe you've never made that decision to follow Christ. So we want you to know that that opportunity is available each and every Sunday right over here to my right. You can just walk in the decision room and say, hey, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to take that step like 6 people did just a couple of weeks ago. If you don't take that first step, how can your kids take that first step? Another way to turn the God dial is to start reading the Bible with your kids. Henry Blackaby, who's the author of a Bible study called Experiencing God, he says this: you don't just want your children to know the Bible story of Daniel, you want to raise up a Daniel. You want your son to know about the life of Samuel, but even more important, you want him to become a Samuel who is always listening to the call of his father. You want your daughter not to just know the story of Esther, but to become an Esther. And he's right. It doesn't matter how much scripture you know, how much scripture you've memorized. What matters is the kind of relationship you have with the one who wrote it. You see, we spend time with all kinds of things. We spend time on these little devices, scrolling through our feeds on social media. We spend time making sure our Pinterest boards are nice and neat, and we dream of all these things we want to do. We spend time perfecting our golf swing. You saw mine a few weeks ago. It's got a lot of work to go, right? We spend time at the gym or the mall or the ballpark. Why not spend time investing in God's word and passing that investment on to our family? And maybe you're here today thinking, I don't really know the Bible that well, Pastor Nate. Like I don't know how to teach my kids that. Then what a better time to start than right now while your kids are inquiring. Start studying the word with him and with your kids so that they can grow up in the same way that you are in the faith and know more about what God's word has to say. And I would also say this: there are all kinds of resources available to you. We've got a couple here at Compass that I want to share with you this morning that I think are great resources. The first one is this. This is called Taking the Plunge. This was written by one of our online campus pastor, Chris Gabbard, who comes and speaks here at our campus from time to time. He wrote this book for kids and parents to study together and ask questions. It's got a little workbook in here. There's a student version of this, and hopefully one day there will be an adult version of this as well. And I think this is a great resource that we would love to get in your hands. You just come talk to us about that. Another resource that I just came to know about is one from one of our own members who wrote this book called Happy New Birthday. And it talks about what Jesus did for us. It's an illustrated book, and it's just incredible. It's just filled with verses of scripture. It tells the story of what Jesus did, and it's incredible. And we'd love to get these resources in your hands. And so if you want to take that step with your kids, know that you just come to us afterwards and say, hey, I want those books. How do I get those? How do I get my hands on those books? And we'll make sure that we get those books in your hands so that you can begin to dial God into your kid's life, maybe more than you ever have before. Now the final thing I would say about turning the dial spiritually with your kids is show them what faith looks like. Show them what a life of integrity looks like. Proverbs 20 verse 7 says, the godly walk with integrity. Blessed are their children who follow them. See, as parents, we need to point the way. Our mission, we say it here at Compass every week, navigating people to God. I think our mission in our homes needs to be navigating our kids to God. That should be our number one priority, is pointing our kids in the right direction. We need to be active in our faith. I like what Dave Stone says about this. He says, your faith should be a noun and a verb. It can't be all talk. I love that. It needs to be something that we put into action. And if you show them what faith looks like, not only will they be blessed, but future generations will be blessed as well. Listen to what David wrote in Psalm 22, verse 30 and 31. He says, our children will also serve him. Future generations will hear about the wonders of the Lord. His righteous acts will be told to those not yet born. They will hear about everything that he has done. This is the byproduct of loving the Lord, future generations loving him. I told you about my one grandpa a few weeks ago. I want to tell you about my other grandpa who passed away about 11 years ago. His name was Don Grella. We call him Pop. And Pop was a guy who, even though he wasn't a pastor, he could have totally been a pastor. Because he owned his own business. He owned an office supply and furniture business. And my pop was the kind of guy who walked into wherever he was delivering office supplies, and he just told people about Jesus. Everywhere he went. In fact, at his funeral, the calling hours were for 2 hours. The calling hour line lasted 3.5 hours because people just kept coming through, lives that we didn't even know that he had impacted for Jesus. And that was something that got passed down to future generations in my family. You know, my dad, he served for years as a volunteer student pastor. And then in 2003, on the same night, my dad and I actually got ordained into ministry together. And my dad served as a pastor over these last several years as I have. And that didn't stop with me and my dad. There's 3 of my cousins who also went to Bible college who are now serving in ministry in different parts of the United States. I have an uncle who married into the family who is also a pastor. And now today, I look at my own kids who are now serving at Compass Kids and serving in all kinds of different areas here at the church every single week because they've put their faith in God. They put their trust in God, and it's passed down from generation to generation. There's a line of faith that exceeds down because my grandpa decided to make it a conscious choice to live out his faith so that his family, that would be how it would be seen in generations to come. He left a legacy of faith that continues to this day. And parents, that's what we ought to strive for. That's how I want to be remembered. You know, I think about my legacy, and I hope that I still have many years here on this earth. I hope that I'm the pastor here at Compass North Fort Worth for the next 30 plus years. But I know that there's going to come a day where my life is going to end, and I hope my vision for the future that I want is that when my life here is about to end, I'm laying in my bed, maybe about to take my final breaths, but surrounding me on that day are my kids who are sold out followers of Christ, who know and love the Lord, and standing next to them are their spouses whom Amanda and I have been praying for since before they were born, that are standing next to them. There are my grandkids who have come to the faith, and maybe even some of my great grandkids, because I simply showed them what it looks like to follow Christ in my own life, and it kind of trickled down from generation to generation. That's the legacy of faith that I want to live. I want them to know and love God like I have. 3 John Chapter 1, verse 4 says, I have no greater joy than to hear that my children are walking in the truth. And that's my prayer for each and every one of you, is that you would have joy because you know that your kids and your grandkids and your great-grandkids are walking in the truth. So maybe this week you need to ask yourself this question: what are the steps I need to take spiritually to make sure that my kids take the next step? And are there things that I need to change? And begin to ask yourself those questions. Begin to apply those things in your life, because it will make all the difference in your family and the generations to come. And then I want to encourage you, come back next week, because we're wrapping up this series and we're going to look at how do we dial in the right others into our kids' lives. It's going to be a great end of the series. We got some great things planned. You don't want to miss it. Let's pray. Father, we thank you for these words that remind us what it looks like to live for you. God, I pray that as we as parents have opportunities to dial you into their lives, God, that we would take advantage of those moments to point them to you. Use the resources and the things that are available to us, God, so that they can be more centered in you. And God, I pray for these families here. I pray for the kids, Encompass kids, Encompass students who are maybe in that stage where they're discovering and they're testing and concluding. God, my prayer is that their conclusions would come to putting you at the center of their lives. Father, be with these parents as they parent their children. in a way that would dial you in. God, give them the strength and the encouragement they need in those difficult days. And we pray these things in your name. Amen. We're glad that you're here worshiping with us today. And I do really hope that you will invite someone you know next week to be with us for our 1-year celebration. It's going to be a great day. And as I said, there's some special things planned you're not going to want to miss. It's going to be an awesome morning. Hope to see you back here next week as we finish up Parental Guidance Required. Have a great day. We love you guys.